First of all, thank you so much for coming to Chess in Focus. Chess in Focus is funded and supported by the University of Glasgow's Games and Gaming Lab, and it's part of a series of lectures called Forms in Focus, where we're taking games that are pertinent to our contemporary moment and placing them in focus to try and work out how and why they've become important to our contemporary moment. And Chess in Focus is first in that series. So the way it's going to work today is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about these three things here. That's how I'm going to situate Chess in Focus, and then Daniel King and I are going to engage in an interview, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Then you're going to be treated to a blitz game between the University of Strathclyde and the University of Glasgow, and then after that we're going to have some breakout groups. There's tea, there's coffee, there's cake, and it's all free. So thank you so much for coming. And I think I'll start by explaining why I chose these things, because there's so many other ways that you place chess in focus. But I thought chess and language was a great place to start, because all of these are derived from the importance that chess has to our language. Because in game studies, we don't have a very objective way of measuring the importance of a game itself. But one of the ways that we can understand a game's relevance is through what it gives our language, its useful turns of phrase, its metaphors and its ideas. And those words are in some ways reproducible, which means that when a game like chess gives us words, we know that it can give us more words. So we're gonna go through why chess and language is just important writ large, and then that brings us on to chess and climate change. You can think of chess and language as me giving you just the latest and greatest in the research of chess and language. There's nothing particularly new there, that's all normal research. But chess and climate change is an intervention that I would like to make, because there's a particular chess word that I think encapsulates a certain kind of feeling that we have in relation to climate change, but I think we could make more widespread. It will allow our experiences to be more shareable. And then finally, we'll be moving on to chess and mental health, because chess has a really weird relationship with mental health. It's what we might call a polarized image. It has this, there's an understanding that chess people are geniuses and madmen, and there's nothing really in between. But what you will find, hopefully, is that when you place the chess player in focus, this black and whiteness actually becomes quite grey. And the problem with chess is that it has constantly in its history been beset by exaggeration, and that has occluded what chess actually does for us. And we're going to try and demystify the chess player in that way. But first of all, chess, if I was going to give you something to really take away from this, is that chess is a dominant metaphor that we live by. And an important way of thinking about that is how language itself is important, because our symbolic language is unique to us. We're the only animal that uses symbolic language at all. And language models the way that we see the world. You can think of your language as a vessel to which your thoughts and feelings are poured. And if you're going to give someone your thoughts and feelings, it always comes in that vessel, and so is shaped by that vessel. And there are certain games, like chess, that have massively influenced the shape of this vessel. And so chess is very, very important to the way we express our thoughts and feelings, even if you are not a chess player. There's lots of words that we use in common parlance that are from chess, but we might not even recognise to sort of be the case. So these elegant parts of chess can influence a group of people, like chess players, but also an entire nation or a culture, without us ever really needing to set up a chessboard. And also, there's an understanding in cognitive psychology that our metaphors are particularly important for the way that we think and shape our thinking. And once again, that is why chess is important alone, because it's a dominant metaphor that we live by. And here's some of them. These are our shared chess language. These are words that I'm sure everyone in this room has used, whether or not they play chess. So when we reign triumphant over someone, we often frame it as a checkmate. Or when something appears to be nearing its end, it becomes an end game. I saw a lot of discussion of Brexit, for example, as an end game. which seems to always be deferred. You had Theresa May's endgame, you had Boris Johnson's endgame. Stalemate, another one that's used consistently in political language. And I think we can all sympathise when we feel like we're part of a nebulous plan by some higher order. We sympathise with the pawn. We often describe ourselves as a pawn in someone else's game or something else's game. Sometimes when we chance against fate, or we overly risk or rely upon our luck, that in itself is likened to a gambit. So as you can see, chess has a wonderful way of giving us multiple terms of phrases. But there's one word in particular that I want to focus on. It's quite a humble word, but it's the one that I think we use most often, and it is directly derived from chess. And it's the humble word, check. That's Geoffrey Chaucer, that's Big Chauce, and this is from the Book of the Duchess, which is the oldest major poem that still survives in Geoffrey Chaucer's Over. Roughly 1368, we're not entirely sure, it's give or take a couple of years. And in this passage, our protagonist is dreaming, and in his dream he happens upon a knight. But this is not the chivalric knight or the knight that jumps in chess. This is a really melancholic knight, and there's nothing chivalric about melancholy. So our narrator is very confused. So he says, why are you so down, essentially? And to describe why he's so down, the knight explains it through this extended metaphor of playing a chess game with fortune. So, for fowls, fortune have played a game at chess with me. Alas, the while, the traitorous fowls are full of guile. Fowls are a medieval copper coin. So it's a gambling game. And then later on, after they've played their game, or near the end, he wishes to adjourn and he says, farewell, sweet Iwis. Iwis is a word we should bring back. It means certainly. Oh, do you want to play a game of chess? Oh, I wish. Get it back in, I say. And farewell all that ever there is. Therewith fortune say, check her, and mate in the midpoint of the checker with a pawn aront. Alas! And so what this means is that just at the end of the game, fortune checkmates our knight with a pawn unexpectedly. And the whole metaphor here is to describe, I think, this unexpected reversal of fortune for this knight. And this word here, check, this is the oldest use that we still have in the English language of the word check in this context. In the English language, this use of the word check, we derive all of our understanding, all of our uses of the word check with a proviso. There's also the French word échec, which gives us exchequer. But if you think about saying something like, oh, do us a favour, check on the dinner, make sure it's not burning, something like that. We are using it in the same way that we use the word check in chess, which is to place restrictions upon something. Because we often think of the word check as something to do with caring, but it's actually something to do with restricting possibilities. So you might imagine, for example, we teach children to check both ways when they cross the road. Because children won't just run up and cuddle a moving car, but they don't understand where the danger is. And so by teaching them to check both ways, they restrict the possibility of danger that they can be under. They learn to not just check for the car, but to observe spaces where they can be endangered. And that's exactly what chess does as well. As you get better at chess, I mean, I don't know, I'm very bad at chess, but I'm told that as you get better at chess, you start worrying less about pieces or like the cars coming and more about the space that these places can come into. You start protecting spaces and occluding, we call it prophylaxis in chess, a move that we play to stop our opponent's best move. And as your chess knowledge evolves to accommodate this sense of danger, so too does language, it appears. This idea of children checking the space, it's very similar to this idea of reducing the possibility of danger that we see in language in general. Also, bear in mind this word fortune here. This is actually the first personification of a chess-playing entity in the English language, and it predates the most famous one, which is the personification of death playing chess by roughly 100 years. So this is Albertus Pictor, who was a Swedish artist in the 15th century. As you can see, there's chess playing, presumably with a very ill man who doesn't seem very happy. It looks like death is certainly winning here. This, I think, influenced our most dominant understanding of chess, death playing chess, which is Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal. These are both Swedish works of art. But I want to sort of hang on this idea of death playing chess, because this moves us on quite grimly to chess and climate change. Because the game we play with our environment is not unlike the games depicted here, I think. And indeed, the knight's game with fortune. If you think about our relationship with climate change, it appears that humanity's time to make good moves is coming to an end. Climate change has turned aspects of our life that we enjoy, like our security, our freedoms, and our rights, into our problems, which is what playing chess with death does. It turns a game that is supposed to be fun into literally deadly seriousness. And of course, regarding climate change, we all feel compelled to act. But it's not clear at all how the individual is supposed to act in the face of climate change. And we also feel like this is not really supposed to be our move to make. And I often speak to students about climate change, and they describe climate change kind of nebulously, how they feel about it. It's often described as a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's a feeling of nihilism, but also a hope, an individualized hope, but a sort of general nihilism that goes without good expression, I think, in our current language. And that is why I think we can use chess and a particular concept in chess to intervene in this gap in our language. And that word is Zugzwang. I apologise for the pronunciation. That was a particularly bad German, but it's a move that basically means, it's a word that means compulsion to move. And it describes situations in chess where you have established some sort of tenuous security, but because you have to move, you will lose that security, and that tenuous security collapses. And it's best illustrated with an example. So we're going to go here. I promise this is the only time you have to play chess, unless you sign up to the Blitz. So what we've got here is a very old study by a player called Paul Morphy. Apparently, he created this study when he was 4. That's probably apocryphal, but most chess stories are from that time. So it's white to play and mate in 2. And if you want to solve this puzzle, the advice I would give you is you need to make a move that respects the fact that when you move, black has to move. So I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to look at that, and then I'm going to turn to the audience and ask for some moves. Do we have any takers?
To rook a6.
Rook a6, you're so right, it hurts. Rook a6. And you think, surely that's the worst move on the board, right? But any move that black makes now destroys this fortress that they created. So if we move the bishop anywhere, this is mate. But also, if they take, this is mate. It's a very elegant example of this concept of Zugzwang. And it's all about destabilizing a stability that is created that is lost when one is compelled to move. And I think that's a really interesting example of the ways that we feel today. Because as in chess, so in life, we are compelled to action. Every action, and even actions that will bring about our downfall. And so too does the prospect of ecological cataclysm compel a response. Because neither situation allows for stasis. For stasis is tantamount to resignation in chess. If you just sit there and don't do anything, you've essentially resigned. But I also think environmental policy and activism is also in that state of Zugzwang. To bring Zugzwang to bear, essentially, is is as an analogy for this kind of this compulsion to move, that loses a lot of its beauty, I think, because Zugzwang is one of the most beautiful concepts in chess. It's a very, very aesthetic quality of chess, but it loses its luster, I think, when we use it in this context. However, I do believe it is the case that Zugzwang can do some work in our description of our relationship with climate change, because it's the renunciation of a defining sense of possibility that exists in both chess and life. Because when you're in Zugzwang, all of your possibilities fall away, and you're set on this hurtling route, probably towards a loss. And life is essentially the same way. We have so many possibilities, and then somehow events convene to lead us down a path of no return, a hurtling determinism that takes its place. So I'm going to suggest Zugzwang as an intervening word to describe this experience of having no good move in relation to the climate. But you might ask if this is necessary, if indeed having this word helps the situation much. Well, problems, particularly new problems, come with a problem. And it's a problem that my field, English literature, wrestles with constantly. It's a problem that we have as individuals, but we also have it culturally. And it's a word called alexithymia. And what alexithymia means is we sometimes have this inability to express our thoughts and feelings. And we've all experienced this. It often turns up when our issues are most pressing. So it's crucial, particularly when we live in interesting times such as this, to ensure that we have language common to our experiences, that we can express ourselves succinctly, with perhaps turning to games like chess for their elegance in describing experiences, so that we may better understand ourselves and others when everything is increasingly shocking and new. We can turn to chess for these kinds of languages. And that's very cheery. So I'm going to cheer you up now by talking about chess and mental health. So this is H.G. Wells, science fiction writer, most famous for writing Time Machine and War of the Worlds. But in 1887, he publishes a collection of essays called Certain Personal Matters, where he, with considerable mirth and satire, muses on things important to his life. And number 30 of 39 is named Concerning Chess. And Wells expresses a love-hate relationship with the game of chess that I think everyone in here who plays chess will be able to relate to. So I'm just going to read you some of it now. So it opens, chess is one of the most unaccountable passions in the world. It slaps the theory of natural selection in the face. It is the most absorbing of occupations, the least satisfying of desires, an aimless excrescence upon life. It annihilates a man. Wells continues, it is a curse upon a man. There is no happiness in chess. Continuing, no chess player sleeps well. You think we're done? No common sinner, innocent of chess, knows these lower depths of remorse. Vast desert balls lie for the chess player beyond the gates of pawn. Stalwart rooks ran headlong at one another. Knights hop sidelong. One's pawns are all tired, and a mate hangs threateningly and never descends. One might think that for Wells, the game of chess, in its black and white cauldron, concocted the most perfect poison for humanity, laying at its feet the mind-stifling, sleep-depriving, existence-crowding devilishness that it then sells to us, or perhaps most aptly sells to us what is most wretched about pain. And yet, Wells concludes after all of this with the final mad qualifier. And yet, Wells says, I have played many games. I've played many games of chess, of course. And with that, Wells' diatribe, I think, turns from chess to the chess player. Because why would someone subject themselves to all of this for fun? But I think all chess players feel like this. And Wells's experiences translate very well to something we've all felt, I think, in chess. But unfortunately, what Wells describes here is a kind of chess madness, which has plagued some of chess's most famous faces. So up here is a player called Paul Morphy. He's an antebellum chess player, and he departs from the world of chess at the height of his powers to pursue a career in law, which goes terribly for him. And him leaving chess gave him one of the great monikers of chess, the pride and sorrow of chess. And this is because of his prodigal rise and then his fall from grace. He eventually he dies at 43, I think, in a bathtub, penniless and perhaps mad. But then a little of this turns up, I think, in the story of Bobby Fischer as well, whose rise in chess against the USSR is buttressed only by his descent into madness and his rank anti-Semitism and his seclusion from the rest of the world, chess or otherwise. There can be little doubt that Fischer and Morphy, near the end of their lives, were in the throes of severe mental illness. But whether or not chess exacerbated this would be just conjecture, I think. For despite chess's association with madness, there is much to suggest that chess heals, not harms the mind. But in these two famous faces, a fear loomed. One of the chess players' monstrosity, as well as their genius, their pride, and their sorrow. And the media doesn't particularly help with this. So this is from the Burlington Patriot, which chronicled Paul Morphy's death from 1884. And as you can see, the last line, he had been a harmless lunatic for several years from an attack of brain fever brought on by incessant chess playing. And the link here between Paul Morphy's mental health and his playing chess is made very clear here. But even in The Guardian in 2011, and this chronicles Bobby Fischer's life, you can see here that the writer couldn't help but link chess players and madness. So he goes on to talk about Wilbur Steinitz, for example, who was the first official chess champion who died in an asylum. As it says, it mentions Paul Morphy there, but there were many others. But this, I think, is a caricature, because there's also a lot of pride in chess. So here are some recent studies that show that chess can help with, a variety of disorders here, ranging from bipolar to depression to ADHD. It can help people with addiction, which I think is very interesting, because chess addiction is something that turns up a lot in the journalistic literature as well. But chess is also protective for people in old age, so it seems to heal as well as harm the mind. And it's also important to recognise that chess was picked up massively during lockdown, largely because of the Queen's Gambit, I think, which popularised chess for non-chess playing publics. But it gave people an outlet when we were incredibly restless, when our mental health was most at siege. So I think we need to buttress this idea of a chess sorrow, a chess madness, with a chess pride, where it seems to be able to heal and become a passion as well as an obsession. So here's a very famous quote from the chess player Bill Hartson, where chess doesn't drive people mad, it keeps mad people sane. And I think the truth of the matter here is that it's more mundane than chess being able to beguile or enmadden or even treat. The chess player is not a madman or a genius. The chess player is an everyman. And the more you place the chess player in focus, this figure between blackness and whiteness becomes very grey. It becomes something that everyone is able to do. And you very rarely see this in the media. We do just have these geniuses or these mad people. And that's because there's something universal about the game of chess, but I think has rubbed off on its players. But in being about everything, it can fall prey to exaggerations about its most extreme qualities. We only see its pride and its sorrow, and we don't see this middle ground where most of the psychic life of chess exists. And I'm just going to round this up now with a brief anecdote. This is from Stefan Zweig's The Royal Game, and it's a beautiful passage in the book, which I hope we're going to get to in the interview. But I want to focus on that middle section, that tiny little islet there, the only game that belongs to all people and all ages. I played in the Warwick Open, and my first game was against an 8-year-old, and an 8-year-old girl, and she battered me. She beat me in 20 moves. And I couldn't believe it. She sort of stood up and she was eye level with me when I was sitting down. And she, with her tiny little, probably sticky, slightly chubby infant fingers, pressed 3 times on the E3 square and looked at me and just went, he's like, you missed it, didn't you, fucking moron? Then I went on to win all of my other games, apart from my final game, which was against an 80-year-old. I mean, I'm going to go, I mean, I assume, got to go back. I'm sure I was playing against him. And it was a longer game, and he beat me in about 60 moves. I remember sitting there with a cup of coffee and thinking, is there any game where in one day you can be beat by an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old? And I really don't think there is. And I think this gets at what this quote is trying to discuss, that chess is a universal language across all of the spectrums of human life. And to play chess makes you an honorary citizen within all of those spheres of life. There is a way that we can play chess where I can sympathise with an 8-year-old, or I can sit there and have an 8-year-old tell me, analyse with me, and I go, oh yeah, no, you're right, yeah, I did miss it. Or as an 80-year-old sort of grinding out a game with them. It's a great collapsing entity. It brings us all together, and we can all enjoy the game for what it is. And I think that is what Matthew Sadler, an English GM, meant when he said, all games are equal, but all chess players know that there is something special about chess. And I think it's that universal nature of it that does make it so deeply, deeply special. Thank you very much. Right, but you didn't come for me. So what we're going to do now is Daniel and I are going to conduct an interview, and then we're going to open it up to questions. I'm just going to introduce Daniel now. So Daniel is an English Grandmaster who has written, I think, 15 books, something like that.
I think it's 70.
17? I've got some in between now and when I read the bio. Very quick. But it's also a broadcaster. He's given colour commentary on, I think, nearly all of the World Championship matches since Strathclyde, I think.
Golly, I think the first one I commentated on was back in 1986, actually.
Oh, wow. I'm not doing a very good job introducing you.
No, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that. But yeah, lots of TVs.
Also a very esteemed chess coach. And dare I say, probably the face of English chess. A very popular YouTuber. His YouTube channel, Power Play Chess, in my opinion, is the most instructive chess resource that is free to the public, that can just be accessed by anyone. It is truly phenomenal. Has wins over Viswanathan Anand as well, an ex-world champion. So please join me in introducing Grandmaster Daniel King to the conversation.
It's really, I thought it was fascinating. Thank you. I thought it was great.
I wish I could have been briefer.
It was really, I mean, we've got, things that, I really wanted to pick up on, actually. But just, I want to say in general, I found this, when you asked me to come up here, I'm not an academic, but it's made me reflect on basically my entire life. I learned the moves of chess at the age of 5, and I wasn't serious about it then. No, probably, but from about the age of 8, 9, I sort of got captured by it. So basically, for most of my entire life, I've been in the chess world as a professional player for about 20 years, and then moving into the media. But I've never sort of really, I mean, from time to time I have, but never properly reflected on why I'm in this chess world still, and my attraction to the game, perhaps you could say addiction to the game. But I think pride and sorrow, as you're talking about, actually is really strong. I feel that very strongly, because sometimes I'm really proud of my achievements, and I think there's a lot to be proud of when one's connected with chess for all the reasons that you gave. It really does connect people, and I think it's really beautiful. But there are other times where, you know, I kind of go along with H.G. Wells. You know, it's tough. And sometimes I think, well, you know, what have I been doing for a lot of my life? And, you know, is there something, you know, more productive that I could have been doing, or I'm not sure. So, you know, I get exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, in my experience playing chess, at least, if we were going to sort of weigh up how much pride and how much sorrow there is, it's 99% sorrow. But that 1% of pride, in my opinion, makes it worth it, because there are no games that I think capture an elegant beauty and this kind of universal experience that can speak to everything quite like a game of chess can. And it's yeah, and the idea of having a chess life, I think, is a really valuable thing for us all to discuss, because I know there's a lot of game studies in the room, and one of the things that we lack in game studies is examples of virtuosic play, because we have tons of data on people who play games to a middling degree, because everyone can do that, but we lack those experiences of those players who have had a life in those games. And that's something that I was hoping that we could touch on a little bit here.
Definitely,
today.
yeah. Just very quickly, when you talked at the end, you know, Matthew Sadler's, you quoted him saying, I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically talking about chess exceptionalism.
Yes.
That you know, there are lots of games, but chess is somehow very special. I think, you know, I think chess is changing. It really is, and particularly with so much chess being played online, that I fear it's turning into another esport. The way that chess is going, and there is this huge culture behind chess, as you know, you were describing, and you know, I'm fascinated by chess in literature, and you know, in films, and in the art world, and in history as well. But actually, is all that being forgotten when you know, this brave new world of chess as an esport, and it's just the same as Fortnite or, you know, whatever. You know, I mean, I can't even name another esport, frankly. I'm clueless. And I fear that might be happening because it's changing so quickly. And now, you know, the number of games of chess being played worldwide, I mean, particularly during the pandemic, has just grown exponentially. It's absolutely exploded. But that's all online. You play on a graphic board online. You know, what would, you know, going back into the history of chess in, you know, 6th century India, or even, I don't know, 20 years ago, with 2 Soviet players, or a bit earlier actually, Soviet, you know, two Russian grandmasters facing each other across the board in the Hall of Columns in Moscow. What would they think of 2 players sitting in front of screens? I mean, this absurd thing. They're even, you know, organizing tournaments where there's a player here sitting behind a screen and directly opposite on a table.
The Crypto Cup. I think
the Crypto Cup. I mean, God, I want. Well, geez. You know, I could have suggested a much simpler solution.
Not about it.
Exactly. You get a board, you know, scrap the computers, and you sit and play with these strange wooden pieces. Do you see what I mean?
I do.
It's turning into an esport at the top level.
It's already.
Excuse me?
Okay, Sweden has classified chess as an esport just this year, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to play with wooden boards anymore?
No, but that's actually the outfit. They didn't want to class it as a sport, so they classed it as an esport.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We did research on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very interesting, and well, obviously, you know, that's the trend. That's the way things are going, and I feel like a dinosaur.
It's one of the in the game studies, for example, which invariably alights upon video games as the main thing that game studies looks at. It looks at everything, but game studies is the main thing. One of the questions that often comes up to hoodwink game studiers is, when you play chess online, is it a video game? And if you think about it, it's actually quite difficult to differentiate because it fits all of the criteria of a video game.
Yeah.
And of course, it's remediated from the physical game of chess. But it's often something we bring up as a kind of a paradox within game studies.
Yeah.
Is when we take these board games and we move them online, does that constitute video game play? And if we think about how people constantly binge things like bullet, very fast games of chess online, this is becoming a pastime that's very similar to Fortnite. These kind of bite-sized chunks of chess.
Exactly.
These quick games of chess. I haven't played a classical game of chess, for example, which is about 90 minutes or extra, by the way, in anger since the pandemic. I don't think. But I played tons of Blitz. It's going to ruin my PhD.
Yeah. That's the thing that, you know, I remember, I mean, I was teaching someone online and they had never played, or perhaps, you know, once or twice, they'd played a proper over-the-board game of chess, but they played all their chess online.
Yeah.
Completely normal. And there might be some of you here today that are like that. And I'm sure we know people who, you know, learned the game during the pandemic, and it's like that. And I said to him, you know, would you consider playing an over-the-board tournament? And he said, yeah, no, I'd love to. You know, he's really enthusiastic. He's had some success online. And I said, just remember, this is a very different experience. And he played a weekend, just like you're describing. And, you know, I spoke to him the next week.
Didn't go very well, but
he crashed completely. He was completely freaked out because the whole experience, the tension, was just completely different from playing online, which had its own tension. But this was something he said, I just couldn't handle it. But also the time control, where it's, you know, you have time control and the game might last 3 or 4 hours. Again, it's something that he wasn't used to. And
eternity.
Yeah, whereas that's what I grew up playing, actually. Even, you know, as a kid, I mean, okay, you play Blitz and stuff, but actually from very early on, you know, when I was 8 years old or something, I was playing relatively long games, and that was completely normal. And it seemed normal that you could sit and think and consider your moves carefully, and that's the whole tradition. That there was something. Okay, I have to be careful with how I was going to say something more respectful about the games. If you're playing, you know, bullet chess, you know, and they're just over in a flash, and you're on to the next one. Oh, it just doesn't matter. I lost that one. Oh, okay, on to the next. I mean, for me, that's a real addiction. Okay, there are different kinds. Again, I have to be really careful because in classical over-the-board chess, that can also very addictive. But there's something, you know, I feel, and I know I'm coming across as very old-fashioned and a bit snobbish about it, but I think the game should be treated with respect. That's my feeling. And Blitz is great fun, and I know that time controls are speeding up, but yeah, that's just how my feeling about it.
Yeah, no, I think one of the ways that chess does sort of receive a lot of its respect is in the literature about chess. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was, what are the bits of art, like maybe visual art or literature? I see you bought a fair few books, that have depicted chess in a way that particularly delights you, or things that perhaps you agree with.
Yeah, I mean these books I brought along. I read 20, 30 years ago, and I've reread a few of them recently. Well, you know, in you know, building up here.
Just going to spin these so that everyone.
Yeah. So I've got this Stefan Zweig, which is written in German, Schachnovelle in German, which just means, you know, chess novella. So it's a short story. It's often translated as the royal game. Yeah. And that's a classic of German literature, actually, and it's fantastic. And, you know, lots to talk about that. Nabokov, The Defense, or in Russian, Nuzhin's Defense. Incredible. And I'll talk about these in a second. Stalemate by Ichokos Meras, who's a Lithuanian writer. And I don't think it's well known in the English-speaking world at all. This is an extraordinary book, which was set in a Jewish ghetto in the Second World War in Lithuania. and it features a game of chess between an SS officer and a Jewish chess prodigy, and it's like he's playing with the devil, and that runs all the way through the book. But also there are side stories which are based on biblical stories. It's such a rich book. It's extraordinary, actually. It's fantastic. And the other thing, I mean, this is The Chess Players, which was filmed by the Indian director and writer Satyajit Ray. And the film is just wonderful. It's humorous, but actually it's kind of a savage satire on 19th century India and what's going on there. But it's based on a short story called The Chess Players by Prem Chand that was written in 1924. Where do I start? Because those are some of my favorite depictions. Satyajit Ray, this film, The Chess Players, I mean, this is maybe my favorite depiction of chess, actually. So it's about two chess players, if you don't know it. I mean, it's a classic of Indian films. Two chess players who are completely addicted to the game. It's set in the 1850s. And while the decadent society is basically falling apart and about to be taken over by the British, the East India Company, who are literally marching into the state, they're sitting playing chess in this beautiful culture, and they talk about, oh yes, we were great warriors once, and the ruler of the state, the Nawab, is a poet and loves music, but basically they're being torn apart by the modern world and by the British, who are just marching in. And the way that the game is depicted is wonderful, because it's a really subtle metaphor, actually. The two chess players, they're playing the old Indian form of the game, which is much slower, where pawns move just one square at the start instead of two, where the queens have more unlimited power. And I mean, the international game really only came into India in the 19th century, and it's really, I mean, through colonization with the British and French and others. But he uses the chess, the slow game of chess, comparing it with the international game that the British played, who were basically much more switched on. So just very quickly, and a friend of theirs comes to visit them, and they're playing chess, and he says, "You may have learned British chess, but you seem not to follow their moves. All these campaigns in Nepal, the Punjab, Afghanistan, where do you think the company gets the money to fight them? From the King of Oud. It's very simple. Just tell the king he's ruling badly. Unless he pays up, the East India Company will take over. King pays up, company hears the jingle of gold, and everything returns to normal once again." But these the chess players say, well, you know, why should we learn in the international game? They call it British chess. It's the international game brought in by the British. And basically it shows, I mean, he's saying that Indians some of them never woke up to what the British were doing. They're playing an international game with guns, and basically this decadent society was just being taken over. It's a really subtle metaphor. It's a really funny film, but actually it's quite a savage satire on what the British were doing, and you know, this decadent old society as well. I think it's fantastic.
So it's kind of an extended metaphor for modernisation.
Yes,
which is interesting, because then you get extended metaphors about games between games, which is quite cool, because Chaturanga is one of those games that contributed so much to modern chess. And it's a weird game, chess, because it's a confluence of lots of other games that come spliced together to create this particular game of chess.
It's about modernisation. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, and the idea of Chaturanga, this more evergreen game, with this newer game that's being framed as a kind of international modernisation. It's a very, very interesting metaphor indeed. Not one that you see a lot, I don't think.
No, I mean that's particularly, you know,
apart from maybe like metaphors for war.
Yeah, so that's
often.
Yeah, I mean, and of course it is a metaphor for war and conflict in that as well. But also this idea of addiction, which is, runs through chess as well, is very strong, because these two, basically they're men of leisure from middle class families, and their families are just, going to pot. There's, one of them's, the wife of one of them is, distraught because, one of them's always leaving the family, and they just go out for the day and play chess, completely addicted. And the other wife of the other player, she's having an affair behind his back. So you can see, it's so decadent, this society. And yeah, of course, the maneuverings of the British, again, it just comes out in the game of chess as well. So yeah, it's multi-layered, actually. There's so many aspects to the game of chess in that as a metaphor. I think that's really clever. But I mean, lots of other things. I mean, Schach Novella, I think, is fantastic. This thing, you mentioned the medieval game of chess, playing chess against the devil, but there's, I believe, a lot of medieval literature, or some medieval literature, which features a man and a woman playing, which, I mean, you mentioned that in the Chaucer. Because chess was an accepted way of men and women coming together, courtship, as kind of courtship. They were sort of allowed to get together over a game of chess. And that was kind of normal. But you can see that it's used in a lot of films.
Yes,
and one of the classic films is the Thomas Crown Affair. I don't know if anyone knows that film, with Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway. And there's this actually quite a funny scene where there's this kind of seduction. They're playing a game of chess. And like a game of chess, it's and kind of seduction, it's very tense. And it's wrapped up with the Faye Dunaway is actually investigating Steve McQueen, who's pulled off this heist, and she suspects him. And the game is a metaphor because she ends up checkmating him, basically understanding his thoughts and what's going on. But at the same time, it's a seduction theme as well. So I think, that's kind of in an age-old tradition. I really like that. And if anyone has seen the Austin Powers films, going from the sublime to the gore blimey, there's basically, they rip off that scene from the Thomas Crown Affair, which I think is quite funny anyway. Because it's so kind of blatant what's going on. And they completely rip it off, and it's hilarious. If you want to brighten up your day, spend 2 minutes, look on YouTube, just put in Austin Powers chess, and you'll find a very, very silly scene. And it's great.
There's a quick question I want to ask.
Yeah, go on, please. Because I'll ramble on for ages. Just
because as a grandmaster, you have a perspective on the game as a professional, and the perspective that a lot of us take is chess is a game of research, and I wonder how these two worlds could come together. So I want you to imagine that you have all of the resources that a university might have. I would like to know how you would like us as researchers to engage with the game of chess, if at all. Perhaps we could just leave it alone. And the areas that you think chess could do with an academic focus, not necessarily a professional one, but an academic focus.
Okay. Wow. I mean, you threw that one to me. When we were kind of preparing for this, and I mean, one thing is, I would like to try and hope that society gets a better understanding of the game of chess, because I feel there's this extraordinary divide. If you're a chess player, you kind of get it. If you're not a chess player, then that world out there, I have always had that party question. So what do you do for a living? And if I say I'm a chess player, often I just lie because I can't be bothered. So I'm a journalist. And okay, that fits into a nice pigeonhole. But when I say I'm a chess player, unless someone actually plays chess, there's this utter incomprehension. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come back with, can you earn a living from chess? Which tells us something about our society.
Trying to do a PhD.
There you go. And there's just such a divide. So I don't know if there was something that academia could do to somehow just inform people about what chess is about, and hopefully this kind of, people will spread the word. I mean, as some of you are very involved in junior chess and coaching there, which I think is something that's really growing, certainly in this country and around the world actually. And I think that's a great help. So that's really good. But I mean, speaking very personally, if I had my time again, or going back to when I stopped playing chess professionally, I'm a chess coach, and I have students playing of all levels actually. But I think sports psychology, could really take on chess. And recently, I've had some conversations with someone who's qualified in that area, and I realised, golly, in my chess playing career, I wish that I'd tapped into this whole world, because I think it just could have helped me enormously. And if I could click my fingers and find a shortcut to a degree in sports psychology, I would do that, because I can see how helpful it would be to the professional scene. And I know that there are a few top chess players now that actually use sports psychologists.
Relatively new phenomenon.
It is, which kind of staggers me, because it's obviously chess is a cerebral game, and it's so much in the mind, as I think a lot of sports are, but particularly chess. And I feel that chess, in sports psychology, chess could be really focused on. And I know it would have a huge effect. And I think it could be also a very fertile ground to be used in other sports as well, or just in life, in business, well, just generally in society, about decision making.
So it's about sort of uncovering the psychic life of chess players and trying to work out the specific places where there are consistent deficits within, not just, I suppose, chess, but in sports playing in general. We could do more. Yeah, I completely agree.
Sorry, very quickly, that whole divide between chess players and non-chess players, because this is something I've had my whole life basically, and it's very hard. And I've always felt like an outsider as a professional chess player. And they just very quickly, can I just read a passage from this? Because, okay, if you don't know The Defense by Nabokov, it's such a rich work, and I think he touches upon a lot of these subjects. So this is about Luzhin, this Russian chess player, a Russian emigre, a Soviet emigre, actually, an emigre from the Soviet Union. And he's a professional chess player. He is socially very gauche. Well, we've met a few chess players like that. So, I have my moments too. But he becomes engaged to this girl who's, let's say, from normal society, from middle class, again a Russian emigre, from they're living in Berlin, and the girl's mother just doesn't get it. She's very bourgeois Russian, from a middle class Russian family, an emigre living in Berlin, and she just doesn't get Luzhin. She doesn't get chess at all. And I've encountered exactly this. So this is basically the mother-in-law, or she's the mother-in-law, future mother-in-law. This is her attitude. Luzhin's profession was trivial, absurd. The existence of such professions was explicable only in terms of these accursed modern times, by the modern urge to make senseless records, these airplanes that want to fly to the sun, marathon races, the Olympic Games. It seemed to her that in former times, in the Russia of her youth, a man occupying himself exclusively with chess would have been an unthinkable phenomenon. However, even nowadays, such a man was so strange that she conceived a vague suspicion that perhaps chess was a cover, a blind, that perhaps Luzhin's occupation was something quite different, and she felt faint at the thought of that dark criminal, perhaps Masonic activity, which the cunning scoundrel concealed behind a predilection for an innocent pastime. Little by little, however, this suspicion dropped away. How could you expect any trickery from such an oath? Besides, he was genuinely famous. You see, that's what she liked. He was genuinely famous. She was staggered and somewhat irritated. The name should be familiar to many when it was completely unknown to her. The Germans who lived in the hotel at the resort, heroically mastering the difficulty of an alien sibilant, pronounced his name, Lucian, with reverence. Her daughter showed her the latest number of a Berlin Illustrated magazine, where in the section devoted to puzzles and crosswords, they published for some reason a remarkable game that Lucian had recently won. You see, she just doesn't get how a game might be elegant, artistic. But can a man really devote himself to such trifles? She exclaimed, looking at her daughter distractedly. Throw one's whole life away on such trifles. Look, you had an uncle who was also good at all sorts of games. Chess, cards, billiards. But at least he had a job and a career and everything. He has a career too, replied the daughter. And really, he's very well known. Nobody's to blame that you never took an interest in chess. Conjurers can also be well known, said she peevishly. But nonetheless, after some thought, she concluded that Lucian's reputation partially justified his existence.
I love that.
That I just love that incomprehension of this bourgeois world that the mother-in-law lives in. Thankfully, my mother-in-law is a lot more understanding.
No, thank you so much for that. And I think we will, I'm just checking the time. I want to get time for some questions. I think we will conclude our interview there. And I just want to thank you. And please, everyone, thank me. If anything, just a fascinating sort of reading list. I must say, if there was one thing to take from this in particular, it's Stefan Zweig's book. There's an idea in Romanticism called the blue flower, the thing that says it all. And if chess had a blue flower, I think it would be in the pages of Zweig's novella there. Chess has never been greater, Faulkner said, in my opinion at least. I mean, they're all great in their own way.
For me, these two, the defense and Schach novella, I think are the best. I could say a lot more about them. Yeah.
Right, okay, so the way this is going to work, you can direct questions to either of us and just fire away, guys. Yes.
Yeah, great. Just a quick footnote to that. I once saw a one-man show in the Fringe of Zweig's novella.
Oh, yeah,
It was amazing.
I chatted with him. It was in 2018.
Yeah, it was really powerful. Anyway, my question was about and you may have anticipated this, I'm sorry I showed up a few minutes late, about this metaphor of chess for dealing with climate change.
Yes.
And it kind of pains me to suggest this because chess is by far, it's even a travesty to compare them, a superior game to the one I'm going to propose. But I thought in some ways chess wasn't the most apt game to provide a metaphor for dealing with climate change, mainly because it's so all or nothing. You either win, lose, or draw. Whereas with climate change, all the outcomes are bad, but some are much worse than others. And what we should try to do is to make the outcomes as, to adapt better, to mitigate climate change as much as we can. But there are like varying degrees of success. And so that kind of, all or nothing aspect of chess versus success coming in degrees in the case of climate change made me think perhaps Jenga is a better metaphor.
Jenga, yeah.
Because there all outcomes are bad, just like with climate change. You could think of the game not as climate change. The game would be human extinction.
Yes.
Eventually the tower is going to fall. Eventually, if it's not climate change, something's going to get us. Humans will go extinct. But the name of the game is to prolong it as long as we can with good moves. That maybe in terms of the structure of the game, even though it's a far inferior game, would provide in some ways a better metaphor for thinking about climate change.
I think you're right. In truth, what I've been trying to wrestle with in regards to chess and climate change is to find in the extant language of chess a particular succinct way of summing up an emotional feeling. In more so than anything else, but it is exactly that. It's an experiment. And if there's one thing that Forms in Focus generally is trying to do, is it's trying to experiment with all of these forms that have been chosen as important to the contemporary moment, to experiment with its language and its form in ways that we can test. And I think Zugzwang, like you say, is an imperfect metaphor. But in refutation or discussion, we move closer because now we need gender in focus. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's a thank you. I think you're quite right.
But actually, thinking about Zugzwang, I think the important thing to note is that in that position, in a proper Zugzwang position like that, if black is unable to move, then black is fine in that position.
If black could
pass,
yeah,
but you're forced to move. That's the point. And then it all collapses. Then you have to compromise what you have facing.
Yeah, and there's an existential quality to that I think some of my students have expressed that I think is in some way imperfectly encapsulated by Zugzwang as a concept. Thank you very much for that excellent question.
Some of us are here from a new chess club in the south of Glasgow, just to give you some hope, Daniel. Our numbers are absolutely booming. Lots of people got into Queen's Gambit, played online, and now they're playing over the board, really enjoying it. Our numbers are crazy. We're meeting 3 times a week at the moment, playing in parks. Just got kicked out of a pub for getting too busy. We had to find a bigger pub.
So you get a wild society crumbles.
Yeah, so Paul and I were talking the way over about mental health, and some of these new people have spoken quite openly and movingly about how much it's helped them with their own situation, just connecting with people and helping others. I was just curious what you think of how much of that is specific to the game of chess, or if we're doing something else like yoga or poetry, would people be connecting that way and get similar benefits, or is there something particular to chess you think?
Is chess special in that sense?
Thank you.
I mean, I'm sure there are lots of other activities that bring people together, but for the same reason that chess was taken on by the Soviet Union, by the Bolsheviks in the early days, after the 1925 Party Congress, to be precise. Of course, there was a tradition in Russia playing chess, but actually they realized this is really cheap. And we can spread this throughout the Soviet Union really, really easily. So the one great advantage of chess is you don't need to build tennis courts, so it's quite an easy medium, basically. So that's a very practical thing. I could talk about the aesthetics of chess and how easy. Actually, I think it's just very practical. And if it works, it works. And frankly, I'm not going to analyze that too greatly. But no, I think it's really important to stress the positive sides of chess about bringing people together, and that you can share something. And when you talked about the pride and sorrow of chess, and sadly, some of these extraordinary players who fell into mental illness, basically. There is a massive difference between playing chess professionally and playing chess as a pastime. And I think my attitude to the game is very different from others. And, when I'm playing chess professionally, and, I looked this up basically, there's something that comes into my mind before I play a game properly, and that's maybe one of the most famous speeches of Shakespeare. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, where he talks about stiffening the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard-favoured rage, lend the eye a terrible aspect. I don't actually recite this, but it encapsulates really well how basically I put my game face on, and I don't think I turn into a very nice person. And this is something I've really struggled with. And actually, after a bit, one of the reasons I no longer play chess professionally, apart from family and kids, it's impossible to combine the two, basically. I looked at myself and I just thought, God, I'm not sure I like the person that I turn into. There was a colleague of mine who no longer plays. He's a little bit older than me. And he said to me, do you know what? I just I got tired of having to turn myself into an assassin. Now, okay, that's kind of extreme language, but basically, when I play properly, I really have to steel myself, and it's about my ego, and it's about just being a bastard. You know, it's really like that. And at the end of this, I find it fascinating because at the end of this, this fantastic speech, he says, you know, Henry V, he's trying to, you know, galvanize his troops. This fantastic speech, which is actually kind of ridiculous. Because, you know, can you, at the same time, can you imitate the action of a tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, lend the eye a terrible aspect, you know, let you set your teeth, stretch your nostrils wide. I mean, it's kind of, you can't do all this at the same time, but it's a kind of rallying cry. It's brilliant. You know exactly where he's coming from. But at the end, he says, "I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit upon this charge," cried God for Harry, England, St. George. The game's afoot. You know, chess is a war game, but war is being likened to a game there, and I see that the whole time.
Mutually,
it's being reflected. And now, you know, sadly, in modern warfare, where chess is often, not chess, war is often modelled with computers, and you know, when people are flying drones, you know, it's been likened to a video game. Actually, I mean, tragic. But I see that reflected the whole time. But yeah, you know, it's fascinating that Shakespeare uses that. The game's afoot. It's a game. So you know, I think people have different attitudes towards chess and play chess with a different. So you know, down at the chess club, you're getting people together, and you feel good because you've met people and you've been able to share a game where you're literally meeting minds. And that's really satisfying. You know, I love that, and I love to share chess experiences. And actually, I think nowadays, you know, I really appreciate the aesthetics of chess, which is another aspect of the game. You know, mating two problems or something like that. So I think people, and that's expressed beautifully in Schach Novella, because there are different. He describes different characters who play chess. You know, one, it's an amusement, it's relaxation. And there's another amateur, Scott, called McConnell. A total amateur, but he takes it so seriously, and he's kind of deluded because he just doesn't realise how bad he is. It's just really funny. But he takes it as a real personal slight if he loses. And then there's the professional. And it's very different attitude to the game. But at an amateur level, fantastic. And I think it's great for mental health. If it works, it works. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you very much.